This is an SM Media production. Hi folks, and welcome to the latest episode of Chronicle, the Rangers journey, right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike. It's an absolute pleasure to be your host as always. We are now at the stage of 2012 to 2015. What happened when Rangers assets were sold to Charles Green, and what followed was 3 years of utter boardroom turmoil. To join me on this part of the journey, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by, from the Sons of Struth, Craig Houston. Craig, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you onto the show. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on.
No problem. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm glad I get one of your happier topics, Scott. It was nice of you to invite me onto this and maybe a treble season or something.
Aye, I mean, we spoke about this off air, and I was very honest. I said I've written out many podcasts since I started this channel, and there's not one like this where it's gave me a permanent sore head just writing it down. Craig, before we get into kind of covering everything in this whole period, obviously you were involved in it. You were campaigning against the board and things like that. We'll get into that later on. But 10 years from this, how hard is it to look back? Because it has taken a long time to actually be able to look back at this time and reflect on just how bad it was.
Well, it was funny looking back at what actually happened to me personally. I put a mask on during all this nonsense, and I think that ended up being a good protection for myself. I mean, state of health, mental health, and physical health. So when we got rid of the bad board, I tried to take the mask off, and it took a wee while, to be honest with you. So I very much became a different character through the time. So social media is my personal choice, and social media is Facebook. And Facebook pings up anniversary posts all the time, what you were doing 6, 7, 8, whatever years ago. And it's incredible sometimes, because I think that was me. You know, it might be an article in a newspaper or a TV interview or something, and it's like they take the cork explodes out, and all these memories and emotions come back. And then, you know, you have that night or two and talk to people. You maybe do podcasts or interviews and talk to people, and all these emotions and memories come back, and then they go back into the bottle and up on the shelf for another period of time. So, it's bizarre for me. I don't, maybe slightly different for me than any normal person. That a lot of these things are in a box and away at the corner of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And when I bring them off the shelf, there's a lot of them I've got personal involvement with, and I cringe sometimes at the level of information that we were putting out as as Sons of Struth. How horrific some of it was, you know. And you think that's what we were 10 years ago, or 12 years ago when these things were happening. And it's really bizarre, and I imagine it'd be bizarre for all Rangers fans, but because a lot is personalised. Like one of the ones that came up not so long ago, and I managed to get it out of my head, was the fact that I got a quarter session paperwork delivered to me one day where I was getting sued for £100,000.
Yeah.
Just imagine the situation. How bad was the situation that a football club was suing, not me, but any fan for hundreds of thousands of £100,000? It's crazy.
And it kind of starts like that. When we're going to start this journey, we kind of closed up the last episode. We looked at the kind of 5-way agreement and how that ended up, but we did kind of gloss over the fact about how Charles Green ended up to take over the club. Now, if you remember, a CVA was always off the table. HMRC were never ever going to agree to a CVA, so the assets then became Duff and Phelps to sell. And Craig, they gave Charles Green, I would describe, one of the deals of the century, because they gave him exclusivity to buy the assets for £5.5 million. Now that included Ibrox, Murray Park, overall kind of goodwill of the club. Craig, that to me is crazy to think about, that how easy it was for Green to buy these shares? Because you look at Ibrox maybe 10 years before that, Ibrox would have been valued at what, 10 times, 20 times that?
You would think.
You would it makes you wonder. Now, obviously, there's things that we need to watch, but for Green to buy that for so low, how do you reflect on that?
Well, there was a lot of things that didn't make sense. And what happened a lot through this story, I would get a wee bit of information and another wee bit of information 6 months down the line, and then 3 months later, another bit of information, and then the jigsaw puzzle would all form eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you were stumbling across things and thinking, well, that's just bloody weird. And one of the weirdest things was the day that Craig White got the keys to Ibrox. We played Hearts on, I think it was a Saturday from memory. And there was 2 photographs. There was one that I referred to as the Reservoir Dogs photo. And if you think of Reservoir Dogs poster, you've got the 5, 6 guys walking up the street. And there was a photograph of him walking up Henderson Drive. The stadium was over to his left, school was over to his right. And there was 5 or 6 people behind him walking in for his first game. And that went, it was a much used photograph in the press the next day and going forward. And then there was another similar photograph of the same people in the director's box, I think, before the game had started. They'd obviously went up to look at the owned, and they were just sitting having a blether and somebody took a snap. Well, about 3 or 4 of the people that were in that photograph were the administrators that put us into admin a year, whatever, many months over the year down the line.
David Greer, the guy's name.
Aye, so when you look back, you think, well, why would the guy that was buying a business beginning in day one with the people that actually put it in, done the administration? And foolishly, the day that we went into admin, the radio stations were telling us how White was charging up the M8 to Edinburgh to get into the Court of Session to get his administrators in before HMRC put theirs in. And I remember at the time foolishly thinking, what a great victory. I'm glad he got there, because they might be a wee bit more lenient and better for us than HMRCs that might have sold off all the assets to different people for different reasons. In hindsight, I wish you'd get a puncture halfway up there, mate. It might have saved us all a lot of bother, because if you join the dots there, so we had Charles Green, has it for a short time, never even puts a set of accounts out because we're in admin before it was due to get done. The guys that walked in the first day we get the keys to the business, are the administrators that put us in the admin, who then do a deal with another guy that people like you and I are sitting going, in hindsight, well, that was all for cheap. So you can join your own dots without me giving my personal opinions on what happened there. It's just weird and strange. And I do believe that somebody else thought they were getting ownership of Rangers, or at least the preferred status, so the preferred bidder status, for a £5 million figure. And actually jumped on a plane to come across the Atlantic, because they were British based, but we're over there doing business, thinking that come Monday, I have to just put this £5 million offer in and I'm owning Rangers. Now, I'm quite sure that was possibly so that it was justifiable that they sold it to somebody else at 5.5. So there's lots of strange things happening, Scott, that people are able to conclude.
What I remember about the day that Green took over, and obviously he took the assets, put it into a new coach. Remember Walter Smith and Jim McCall put in, they put in some sort of offer.
Yeah.
At the time, that was always weird to me. Like, why at the time, and I know obviously why that wasn't put through, but at the time I remember thinking, why did Smith and McCall not go in earlier? Why? Does Jim McCall? We know Jim McCall's very successful businessman. He probably has the money to do it. Why did he come in the day after? And that was always the thing that stood out to me. And I think we know now why.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we can't ask the man, God rest him. But Walter Smith's a good judge of character. If Walter Smith told me somebody was good or bad, I would tend to take his word for it. So I think plenty of people in there thought for day one this can't be right. And Walter Smith wasn't in Ibrox until the regime change and stayed away for a long time. And that tells you all you need to know as well.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he wouldn't even want to sit in the director's box with these people and watch his beloved team, very significant.
Also, as well, kind of once Green came in and everything get kind of settled down a bit in terms of the kind of on-field situation was made a bit clearer. There wasn't an over. Things did kind of stabilise, especially in the public at the time. There wasn't much of a there wasn't many stories going on in the background. Obviously, the only thing that kind of Green really did between then and November was kind of bring in Jim Traynor, which I think was a disaster from the word go. Would you agree with that?
It was a disaster. I mean, Jim's a professional, and he, without getting into current day, I probably would prefer him today in the job. If I'm perfectly honest with you.
Certainly than the guy now. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, because he's an experienced man. His contacts. He could probably kill stories quite easily. Because his contacts, his influence in the press. So it wasn't a bad appointment, but it was just bad timing.
Bad timing, but also, I mean, there was a lot coming out during that time. Do you remember the interview with him and McCoy that Christmas? Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
It was basically, it wasn't like we saw that earlier. We're recording this the week. John Bennett gave an interview for Rangers TV, and that seemed to be very well organised, I would say. But the interview in that time between Jim Traynor and Alan McCoy wasn't. It was a journalist interviewing a manager and really putting him on the spot. It was. It just wasn't overly convincing. The reason Green was calming things down is because he was getting his pitch ready for the IPO. That was, very few businesses you'll see will go to market within 6 months. So that was obviously from the word go what he wanted to do.
Oh, aye.
And
remember the costs and all that. Remember the AGM where we were questioning the costs, and I can't remember the exact figures, but on the prospectus it was like expected cost 200 grand, and it turned out at 4 million quid, right? Mm-hmm. And somebody asked at the AGM, can you cut these? Can you cut these down and tell us what these costs are? And Stockbridge at the time said, no, I can't. And the guy said, I actually know the guy now that didn't at the time, but he's a financial guy from England that asked the question. He says, no, Brian, I do what you do for a living. You can answer that question. And what he tried to say was, well, we're a bad risk, so that's why people charge us money. And I was like, but we're a bad risk when you put the prospectus together. Mm-hmm. Our rating, finance rating didn't go down. And, you reckoned it was going to cost a few $100,000. It was just all this nonsense stuff. That was early on in our campaign, and it was the first AGM, after Sons of Struth was unfortunately born. And this money was just flying out the door. I remember one of the reasons that we started was we had things like there was watermelons getting invoiced to Auchenhowie for 10 quid. Like who's getting a cut of that? Who's getting an envelope of that deal? So there was all this nonsense going on. Madness, mate, madness.
When with Green early on, do you remember there was always, I think, scepticism to who his actual investors were, because he would, you know as well as me, he would say literally anything. I mean, all 2 words, Dallas Cowboys, and he would literally say anything just to. And he's a salesman. He's good at what he does. He's a good communicator. But I remember very specifically, and you might remember this as well, an interview with Nigel Spackman. Remember that?
Yeah.
There was an interview with Nigel Spackman, and he was a Sheffield United manager. I think maybe late 90s, maybe. And they'd asked him about what this guy Charles Green was like, who was coming in, obviously being a Sheffield United chief executive, and that did not read well. And I remember specifically that time thinking, this.
I think Nigel Spackman in hindsight held back. I remember watching that interview a couple of 3 years after it and thinking he's probably been wary of what he said, because I think if anybody thinks and believes that Craig White and Charles Green were the top of the tree of this bunch of people, I'm trying to watch my words here when I describe them as a bunch of people, then you're wrong. They're not the top of the tree. And when you find out who was at the top of the tree and you get ideas who was top of the tree, you can probably understand why Nigel Spackman wasn't wanting to say too much. Mm-hmm. But even knowing that, he was still pretty scathing. And he was trying to warn us without getting into too much detail.
But Green gets his IPO. He raises 22 million in unbelievable kind of deal with the stock exchange, and very early on, like that should have been, if that was, I think if the Blue Knights, for example, would went in and done an IPO, they would have done the same. They would have done it the same way. They would have went in, tried to get the shares, tried to bring the club back to good health. But the difference would have been that money would have been reinvested in the club.
Yeah,
a lot of money very early on seemed to disappear from the doors of Ibrox.
Well, we'd done an article about it way back, and it was trying to figure out how much money we'd brought through the door, and there was like 22 million for the IPO. I think it was a figure, 22 or 23 million. Can't remember how much he got from initial investors, but there was a load of them, and there was a figure. I think it was maybe 10 million, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going, well, we've had 2 years of season books, and we've had this and we've had that. And I think the whole thing added up to about between 50 and 70 million. Mm-hmm. We're playing in the 3rd tier of Scottish football at the time.
Aye.
You know what I mean? We had Creebury as a centre back. You know what I mean? And we had managed to spend, I think it was over 50 million. I mean, we spent more then than we're now.
Aye.
And it was just bonkers that where did the money go? And we'll probably never know. And certainly with Craig Whitehair, we'll never know because he never even had to produce a set of accounts for us to look at. But aye, watermelons at a tenner. That's some deal, that.
Aye, and it's craziness like that. Like that, there is obviously that badness about the whole thing, but there's also this kind of weirdly comical nature to it, like things like that, things like Wi-Fi, things like obviously catering that was going on. There was all these nonsense things going on that now you look back and think that's where Rangers were. I mean, we're recording this in 2022. Rangers are in a groups with Napoli, Liverpool, and Ajax, and 10 years before that, we're seeing them play like I'm going away to Berwick and getting boys stuck in a hedge at Brecon. It's just crazy. And when you look back at like this is where Rangers were, and that felt a wee miles away.
See the European run last year. I remember when it started, my son saying to me, "Is this what it used to always be like?" And I said, "Son, I mean, not that long ago, I remember going driving to Fife for a Saturday kickoff. And I think I had been in Fife something ridiculous like 9 times in 3 months. I'd never been to Fife more than 9 times in my life. And you've gone to Cowdenbeath and all these mental Broth and Alloa. I hated going to Alloa. Alloa was probably one of the best facilities I've visited. Every time I went there, I think it was snowing. That was how the story was. It's a Hollywood epic.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't believe if somebody made it into a Hollywood epic. It was just crazy. Every day there was something else. Every day there was more information coming out and more stories, and there
was so much. But the kind of the two kind of good bits of news at the time were obviously the HMRC verdict came in slightly later than we originally thought, but it was ruled that they'd not contravened any tax law with the use of EBTs. Obviously, HMRC went on to appeal that later on, but at the time, that felt like a vindication. It did, and the same with the Lord Mimo Smith thing. This felt like all the people saying that Rangers were cheats, and you remember at the time that the newspapers were full of it, that Rangers should be. Do you remember Michael Kelly going on STV and guys like that going on, and they were just basically bringing these guys out to have a pop, and this felt like a vindication. I remember very specifically as well Chris Graham going on STV that night.
I remember
having a wee dig at Spears.
Aye.
Because it was a vindication, and that's totally what it was, and it felt that at the time, didn't it?
Oh, 100%. I get taken on to BBC to do a live thing the night that result came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember I didn't know Chris at the time. I was just a rank and file guy. I needed to know who Craig Houston was when he done. I remember watching that live and thinking, "I like that boy. He talks well. He's got his information lined up, and he's up against a professional."
Mm-hmm.
And I think he won with a unanimous decision that night. And it was an inspiration to me, if I'm perfectly honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
When 6 months, a year down the line, I had to start doing that sort of stuff, and we were just getting lined. You're right, they were pulling folk off. Just have a go at Rangers. Papers were at it, the news, the radio stations were at it. It was just crazy, and it was just boot us, and we're done. And I thought, you know what? You wouldn't do that in the street on a fist fight.
Yeah.
people in the street that fight in the street have got better morals than the people that were coming in to have a pop at us. What did they want? Were they not happy that we actually came through the other side? Were they not happy that we were still playing at football that summer? Would they have preferred to have no Rangers in Scottish football? Which, but then you've got a one-horse race that it's hard enough to market Scottish football now, but I genuinely think there was disappointment with some people that we actually kicked off that season.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think you see it still to this day. There's nonsense everywhere. I mean, it's the people that were having a dig thought that they wanted the club gone, and the fact they're still here is the fact that they've not got their wish, and it's bitterness. It's nothing. And we spoke about that last week with the SPL vote. I mean, if you're telling me that you would boycott giving your own club season ticket money in favour of voting,
that's right.
That to me is the lowest of the low, and I've said that repeatedly.
Your hatred for us was more than the love for your own club.
Correct, and that to me, I will never ever understand that, and never ever want to. But the thing with this whole thing is this kind of first season in the third division. Obviously, we spoke last week off the park. On the park, it was relatively routine. It wasn't fun to watch, but off the field, it was beginning to kind of come to a head a wee bit. I mean, Green, I think people had saw through his bravado, I think, and getting into the kind of that day in April where the police obviously get involved with searching kind of relating to the purchase between White and Murray, and obviously the day with the ticket to steal what White had. We didn't really touch on the ticket to steal, but White was ordered to pay it back. The 18 million he'd lost a claim at the High Court, but the SFA then got involved with Green, asked Green about his dealings with White, and this seemed to be the day it all turned, because after that it was, I think, there was a thing with Green, I think, as well. I think it's that desperation of you want this guy to be a good guy. You want a good guy. And you were seeing it that he was just full of crap. And it was just
I get taken down, invited. There's a football media course done at a place down, is it Burnley University? It's a football university. Mm-hmm. And I get taken down, invited down by a guy that was a professor at it. He's now a director at Aston Villa.
Right.
And he wanted me to talk to them about fans' movements.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were talking, I said, with the experience I've had now, I could write a book about how to rip a football club off. Mm-hmm. Because you turn up and you delete where applicable and tell everybody that your vision is to get us in the Champions League, stroke the English Premier League, stroke the Championship, stroke the Scottish, whatever suits the agenda. Yeah. And you get football, and the reason you can do it so easy is football fans, and I know this through personal experience, football fans want to believe good news and they want to disbelieve bad news. Mm-hmm. So when this guy that nobody's ever heard of before starts a thing called Sons of Struth on a whim and starts handing out pieces of paper outside Ibrox to folk telling them bad news about their club, they don't want to know.
No.
The default setting is we want to listen to the guy that said we're going to be in the Champions League within 5
years. And that's what kind of got Murray. That's what kept Murray, kept the reputation with Murray for years, is that people didn't want to believe that this guy who was feeding them everything was running the club into the ground. And that was, I remember, David Edgar said that repeatedly over the years that he said that. I mean, he was the guy, they were the guys telling everybody what they didn't want to hear, and you know as well as I do, it's impossible to get through.
But the saving grace with Murray was, Murray gave us 9 in a row, Gascoigne, Loud, all these things, so at least with Murray you had a bit of balance there. That you knew, we all heard stories about the metal bills getting into when we constructed the club deck and all these things. Understood all that, but you always had on the flip side of that, Gaza, Loud up 9 in a row. Almost every year in the Champions League, all this stuff, So, yeah, and listen, Manchester. So, but with these guys, we had beaten Brecon. You had nothing to balance it with. With no balance. So when the stories started coming out and they were bad, they never really had much. They couldn't say, but we brought you Gaza. You brought us Creebury. Wow, brought us Big Clark. All this stuff, but. Aye, horrific, mate.
Get into that kind of the summer of 2013. Kind of Green had resigned. Walter Smith had come in as chairman to the board, and I think almost immediately, as you say, I think he saw right through what was going on. I think he just saw a complete circus.
Yep.
And I want to throw some names at you, and obviously just what you kind of thought about them in that time. Like, when did you first hear about the brothers from Inverclyde?
When did I first hear about them?
Yeah.
The first day they came in. And it was quite bizarre. I would probably never have known the names of the guys that owned the girls' buses, bar the fact that a few years before it, my son played for Queen's Park Pro Youth team.
Right.
And this boy for Greenock came up for a trial. And his dad would drive up every game with a different fancy motor.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at the games with me, and folk would say, that's the guy that owns McGill's.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't say I knew him. I maybe said hello to him 2 or 3 times as you would at a kid's game of football with a boy that's in trial. So I knew who this guy was. So when the name came out, it wasn't an unknown name to me. And obviously between standing outside the football parts where parents a lot of gossip about other parents and him coming to Rangers, I knew a fair amount about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a strange appointment. I didn't think it was maybe that strange in putting money in the club. But when you then put people like him onto boards and make up these special boards, because he's not going to fit in proper tests, so we'll put his brother in that board and put him in the other board. But by that time, I think we were already mobile and asking questions,
And that's the thing we know, we kind of know the stories, and we're not going to get into them for obvious reasons, but when those guys come in, and particularly Green selling his shares to Sandy, you wonder what that was all about. You wonder.
Well, let me tell you, I had that conversation with Sandy Easdale and Sandy Easdale's boardroom at McGill's, right, while they were still a substantial shareholder. And the reason I went to speak to him was I had a guy who wanted to buy his shares. So I went and spoke to him. I was in his boardroom twice. And I'll be honest with you, see Sandy Easdale, I don't think Sandy Easdale should have been anywhere near Rangers Football Club as a director.
Mm-hmm.
The guy sued me for £100,000. I was arrested 3-4 times without being charged, and a couple of them were to do with Sandy Easdale. So I should maybe hate the guy. But why? I actually got on all right with him. I had to have a fight. I couldn't tell anybody at the time Sandy Easdale was not a bad guy, because it was dead. It was black and white there. It was Jedis versus Stormtroopers. It was Cowboys versus Indians. You're on that side, you're an Indian, you're the Cowboys here. Mm. But seeing a different universe with different things going on, if I'd bumped into Sandy Easdale some other way, I'd probably quite go on with him. Mm-hmm. He was the only guy in there that paid full money for his shares.
Yeah.
They took his pants down as well. But when he got in, he was complicit, because he made decisions and he was involved in things, and he was suing me for £100,000, all that stuff. So he'd done a lot of wrong things. But I actually can't hate him. I bumped into him at Glasgow Airport a few years after it was all finished, and that was quite a funny experience. But I think he was duped. All the rest of them were getting shares between 1 pence, 20 pence, 25, and Sandy paid 40 or 50 or whatever it was. He paid the same as us.
Do you think they were just in way over their head?
I think Charlie Boy bumped into this guy that had access to a few quid and thought, he's a victim here. Mm. I could get a sale off of him dead easy. And I was in sales for 25 years myself, right? So I know about the game.
And it's all about your pitch, innit? It's all about how you sell it.
His pitch, he took Sandy and his brother in, sat him in the director's box in an empty stadium and said, in 5 years' time, you're going to have a Champions League move, and it'll be Real Madrid and Juventus we're playing. Where'd this sign, right?
Aye.
And he got in and he made lots of mistakes. And he knew what was going on. If he was in that building and didn't know what was going on, he's a bit daft or I give him credit for, right? But and I can't remember saying to him that day in his boardroom, I said, "Dude, actually, they love you, because see, when this is over," I said, "the game's over. The dogs in the street know that the next AGM comes up, use her out."
Yeah.
So I've got a guy who wanted to buy your shares, and my advice would be to take them, because see, if you're the last man in, they'll all bugger off 400 miles away back down to England. You'll still be here because your business, your family's at school, all that stuff. and your life was not going to be nice. I didn't realise was within weeks folk were going to be getting him death threats. I'd had plenty of them up to that point, but he started getting them. I told him, you're their whipping boy. You're going to get it. And they'd love it. They love you being here. And I think he got involved, and he liked the idea of getting picked up in Ashley's private helicopter and whizzed off to meetings and all of that stuff. And he liked the high life and the profile it gave him. It was weird. Listen, he said he's got a certain amount of success as a businessman, and he does things a wee bit different for others. But you can't take that away from him. But I still think he was out his league with these guys. These guys are different level.
Yeah, I mean, one name I want to throw at you, who at the time, I didn't think this guy seemed to be a bad guy, but you actually look behind the bonnet and you're like, what on earth is he all about? Craig Mather. Now, Craig Mather remarkably got a job just by giving the guys money. I mean, it's an incredible turn of events.
I believe he had a lot to do with some of the transfers as well.
Yeah, and he didn't seem a bad guy. He seemed a decent communicator at the time, but I just think he was another guy who just.
He was able in his own pockets. He was there for Craig Mather, not for Rangers Football Club.
Yeah, and that's the issue with a lot of these guys.
Yeah,
Do you think there's anybody out of that whole regime that was really interested in helping the club?
There was one guy that I spent a lot of time with, and unfortunately I was in his office when people were wanting to take his head off at the door, and it was the night Sandy Jardine passed away, and it was Graham Wallace that told me that they'd just got a phone call.
Yeah,
and I got on well with Graham, but again, he was on the other side for us, and I think under a different time, again, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think he genuinely did want to do a job, but was constrained to a certain degree. And I asked him openly in his office one day, I said, look, I've got to paint you as a good guy and a bad guy, right? People will look to me for my observations of you. I said, now, if you want to tell me some truths here, we can try and protect you a wee bit for what's going to happen in the public. But if I'm going to ask you a straight question, and you can answer me whatever way you want. Are you in here trying to do good and others are stopping you? Because if that's the case, there'll be a different public image given to you.
Yeah.
Do you know what he done next? He looked over his two shoulders as if to check nobody was listening, and said, no, Craig, everything's fine in here. And it just, I was in, as I said, sales for 25 years. I didn't study body language or anything like that. But when you're in that industry for that long, you get to understand when something odd's happening. And that was certainly one of these situations. But again, and a funny thing happened. I got a message on Facebook off a random guy saying to me, I'm in London now, and guess who's sitting in the restaurant with me? And I went, who is it? And he said, Graham Wallace. I said, oh, is it? I said, go and tell him you've just got a message off me and say I'm asking for him, and I hope he's well. And the guy was like, what? I went, oh, seriously? I said, he was always present to me. He would, anytime I wanted to go and speak to him, he would be, he was easy to speak to in the curtain board, if I'm perfectly honest. And he would welcome me in, sit down, listen to me, talk to me, and, as a person. And I think, he's one, you've asked me a question, I think he's probably the only one that I kind of always had a feeling at the time that Malcolm Murray seemed to know what. Well, to be fair, I don't class Malcolm as being in that gang.
Aye, but I think he went in for the right reasons, but I think quickly he was just way. Yeah,
well, by the time we had mobilised, Malcolm had been in and out. Aye. So Malcolm was never on our hit list, and I got to know Malcolm very well through the time. And he used to help me with things that I didn't understand. I used to be able to phone him and say, Malcolm, what does an IPO mean? For example, things that a fan shouldn't know, and I had to learn pretty damn quick. So I don't. Malcolm was the same sort of thing as they try to do with Walter Smith, to be a face. And I know through personal conversations with Malcolm, and I don't want to divulge that because I don't know how much it would get potentially somebody else into bother. There was things being hidden from him, and there was things that he would constantly ask that he was never given the answers to, and given strange answers and all that. So, I certainly don't have him even in, and I don't see him in that group.
Yeah, I mean, we'll touch on a couple of guys who really do not have any redeeming qualities at all. Imran Ahmed, David Somers.
Imran Ahmed, unfortunately, didn't have the privilege of meeting that man. But when you've got a guy, in the periphery of your club who's on Interpol's most wanted, that's never a good starting point. That's just never a great starting point. And I remember the time he turned up at Ibrox, and there was journalists all flying about the town. And I think just before that, Sandy had said that he'd not to do with the club on some interview, and within weeks or months, he's driving them about and taking them for meals in the Regano and up at the training ground and all that. You're like, guys, we're no thick, But that's never a good look. And the Somers one, that guy, my everlasting memory of that guy will be the AGM when somebody asked him a question and they gave him the answer. Well, when you're the chairman of the Rangers Football Club, you can decide what happens. And you thought, seriously, mate?
I remember
somebody tried to attack him. That was the one in the corner where the away end, if you remember, the right corner.
It was just basically it was like a gazebo you would see in somebody selling hamburgers at in a scout fit. That's generally what it was like.
Seen better marquees at scout fits, and then as they were going out, they had to go up the Govan front to get back in the stand, and I think somebody took a flyer for them, and quite rightly, quite rightly so. That's maybe a wee bit harsh, but you can understand why that happened. But that was my everlasting memory.
I remember him and Bomber having and I think Bias had just come in at that time as well when Bomber had said something like,
"Rats,
I hope you're a better quality man than the other rats at that table," and that was the feeling among the fans. Like, we could see what these guys were doing.
Yeah.
And it was just like crazy. But again, I mean, the accounts come out in October and there's an operating loss for £14 million, despite a 22 million share issue. I mean, stuff like that does not happen anywhere else other than it's either one of two things. It's either on purpose or it's just really, really poor. It's only one or the other. But how do you go from that? And what was the kind of thoughts when you heard that? And you heard obviously the stuff about like McCoy's wage. McCoy was in a substantial wage for it, as you say, a third division manager. Green's bonus and things like that. Just there was so much going out the club, and it was just remarkable how quickly it all seemed to just go away. This whole kind of that money, it just seemed to just vanish off the table.
Yeah, and around about that time, again, if you think the chronological order, Erdman happened, Green comes in. A few months after it, this guy turns up in your telly for an organisation called Sons of Struth that nobody's heard of, and starts putting out leaflets and all that stuff. And we did get a lot of people angry with us at football matches. I remember one guy threatening me at air one day, and I was like, I actually understand it. You know what I mean? But it was things like that, set of accounts coming out, that got people going, hold on a minute. And that's where we really started to get a lot of support behind us. And when we said we were doing something, we got lots of people turning up and standing beside us. And it just became an avalanche of information, poor information. But that to me was quite a. I remember walking into the AGM, and it was the main stand, that first one. And me and my wee mate Sandy that started Sons of Struth, we were like, what are we going to do here today? The expectation is we're turning up with banners and all that. And we decided we were going to do nothing, absolutely nothing. And we sat down, and when they get introduced to the stage, I think the AGM attendees booed for 4.5 minutes and were screaming at them and all that. And me and Sandy just looked at each other and went, we couldn't have got this reaction if we'd asked it to happen. It was just mental. So, and the accounts had just came out and all this information. And that was quite a significant turning point for me, because I actually started feeling at that time, we have got a lot of people that are getting to have the same mind as us and are understanding stuff that actually football fans shouldn't be interested in. We should be having discussions in the pub about who's the best right back. That's what we should be talking about. But it wasn't, I couldn't get into a pub, and I don't think I was any different for any other Rangers fan, and you'd be talking about, contracts that came up, and what's Ashley's involvement? Has he only got 10%? All this sort of nonsense. But its big turning point was round about that time, that first AGM, round about the November.
Aye, and that's kind of where Dave King begins to kind of build his claim. Is that maybe fair to say? Like he begins to rally the troops, where he was very obviously he's very close to Chris. What was your kind of first kind of hearing that King was kind of trying to get back at? Obviously, he'd been in touch with Mather and things like that, and that story's well documented. But he was obviously trying to rally the troops, shall we say. When do you first kind of hear that King's kind of really serious about
that? I can't remember the dates and things. I'm not very good with dates. I'm good with chronological order, but I can never really put them, dates and years and stuff on stuff. But I got a phone call one day to go into city centre and meet Dave King, and he got a load of different people, for different places, about a dozen is in this room, and put his plan. This is what I want to do. And I remember I just sat down and we all took a seat, and then Dave came in, and I was actually just sitting to his left-hand side, first seat from him. And he said, "Look, I'm meeting you today. I'm meeting the Rangers board tomorrow. I'm meeting some other people that have suggested they want to invest and go into this with me on the Sunday, and I'll come back and speak to you on the Monday and tell you how this all got on." And he said, "But could you do me a favour?" And he turned around to me and he said, "Could you maybe turn the volume down a wee bit while I'm trying to do this?" And I said, "Dave, I've got something and you don't know about that I can't control the volume." And he went, "What is it?" I says, "I need to tell you in private." And what it was, I'd been served notice of £100,000 lawsuit against me, but it wasn't public knowledge yet.
Yeah.
And I said, "No, that could hit at any time, Dave. I can't control this. That'll create a lot of noise." I said, "So I'll tell you what I'll do." I said, "I think you're wrong, because we've done this before with them, and we've turned the noise down thinking they were coming to the table with stuff, and they've double deltas and stuff. So I don't think we should ever turn the noise down. But you're a man that knows boardrooms better than me, and you're going in to speak to these in the boardroom. So I'll appreciate that, and I'll take that on board. But I think you're wrong. But if this thing comes out about me getting sued for 100 grand, that'll create noise that I can't control." And he went, "No, that's fine. I appreciate that, and thanks very much." Came back in on the Monday after meeting the board. He sat down, and the first thing he said was apologise to me. And he said, "Craig, I asked you on Friday to turn the noise down, and you were right and I was wrong. I've now met these people. They do not deserve anybody to give them any slack at all. So don't let anybody ever tell you to turn the noise down again, because they're cranks." And he'd went into the boardroom and spoke to him and thought he was putting a plan together that a normal business would have found acceptable, and let him invest in the club at the time, and get some shares and put him on the board. But with the reaction he got, and they're making decisions that don't make sense, tells you all you need to know. They didn't want anybody in there that wasn't in the gang,
And I think that's how King was able to get that support, because we know this board were, as you say, I think the word you use is probably spot on, but King could play them at their own game. They were bad guys, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, but King could go lower. King could play them at their own game. And that's what that's what you saw. King could attack them and put them in the back foot.
What you've got to remember as well is these guys, most of them are only representing money.
Aye.
Dave King was representing his own money.
Yeah.
And to get any sort of wealth, I've been fortunate enough to meet probably 3 or 4 people in my life that are at this financial level of Dave King, right? And in the nicest possible terms, I would never say anything bad about Dave King, but they're all strange. And I don't mean strange being bad. I mean different for me and you.
Yeah.
If we were the same as Dave King, we'd have his wealth. And if he was the same as you and I, he'd be, the same wealth as you and I. And it's a totally different level. And all these people that I've met, they've got this different personality. They've got a different way of thinking, different way of acting. And so Dave King was maybe dealing with a guy. Let's take Ashley as an example. With a guy with similar figures and similar amounts of zeros at the end of the bank. But he wasn't dealing with him. He was dealing with the guy that he'd put on the board.
Yeah.
So he would have danced rings around these people because he's in a different level.
Yeah.
He wasn't in a room with Richard Branson. He was in a room with a guy that was representing a guy that maybe had some money. different levels, mate. Different level. And he would just so when Dave, you know, he had that. He was known to the fans and everybody. It was well documented. The 20 million he'd lost with the Murray time, and you know, he was associated with a successful time at the club. So he was a comfortable, you know, friendly, nice, cuddly name.
Safe pair of hands. That was it was, that was the support. The support needed that. The support wanted somebody in there who was going to do the best for the club. And I think Paul Murray's another guy as well. I think there's a big difference between Paul Murray and Dave King. Paul Murray's a lovely guy, but I think the big difference between Dave King and Paul Murray is Dave King, as we say, can really attack, like put the board in the back foot. I don't think Murray was ever comfortable doing that. Is that fair to say? Like,
don't get me wrong. You know, Paul's no shrinking violet. And he would maybe go about things a different way. Again, the first time I met Paul, I was invited into a meeting in his lawyer's office. He was wanting to talk to some fans about, you know, some ideas and stuff. And I was, you know, very impressed with him.
Oh, he's an impressive guy.
Aye, and you know, I still speak to Paul to this day. I've not spoken to him for a while, but you know, I met him. He came around. We run a Sons of Struth football academy now, and he wanted to see that, and then he came, I think, like 2 months ago, and toured them around the training venues that we had on that night, and you know, that's how close me and Paul are. You know, I was impressed with him the first time, and impressed, you know, Zeke was impressed. But and you know, the mad thing is, there seems to be this. I'm going to fast forward in 7 years, but there seems to be this thought in some people's minds now that suddenly Dave King and Paul Murray are not good people.
No.
You know, and I find that hard.
I find that astonishing. Like, as you say.
Yeah. You think, when did these two guys suddenly become bad guys? You know?
Exactly. And one guy who I think deserves remarkable credit for his overall leadership in this whole thing with Sandy Jardine, and obviously around about the time Sandy passed away, obviously due to cancer, and just how much does Sandy deserve recognition? I mean, in my opinion,
to be fair, I think the timing of the whole thing, when we started doing what we started, by that point Sandy didn't have much involvement at all. Sandy was working in the club, and obviously in hindsight his illness had probably started by then. But certainly before Sons of Struth was even a thing, and with the Marcy Hamden, and you know, through the administration a few years before, I think again it's a name, it's an idol, it's an icon that people are comfortable with, and you know, if he's saying this X, Y, and Z, then you know you can take that to the bank. Sandy Jardine's involved, but I didn't have too much personal involvement with Sandy, because I say by the time we were involved, when we were a thing, that, you know, the Marcy Hamden and all that had been done, and the Fighting Fund, you know, was already a thing, and unfortunately in hindsight was probably just down to his health, that probably none of us were aware at the time. But no, Sandy Jardine, me, you know, the footballing side, he was playing for Rangers when I started going to watch Rangers, and every time somebody mentions Sandy Jardine to me, I can vision the programmes that I used to love. And it was the late 70s, early 80s. It was a red programme with a blue circle and Sandy Jardine coming out the circle. If you know what I mean, that was the way it started. And you know, that's the Sandy Jardine that I remember. But that Sandy Jardine you talk of with the Fighting Fund and the March to Ibrox, March to Hamden, all these things, absolutely fantastic. And the public name to come in and get involved. I mean, I must have asked 20 people before I had somebody like Bomber came and supported what I was doing. So I know how difficult it is for people to actually put their head above the parapet when they've got a presence and you know, idolised. So, you know, hat off to him.
And hat off to him. A remarkable human being. But round about the kind of mid-2014, getting into the season in the Championship, Mike Ashley begins to become a kind of a power broker in the club. He's a major stakeholder at this point. I think a lot of things are happening around him. I mean, Derek Lumbias and Barry Leach. I've got a whole story about Barry Leach that I'll save for another day. But when you first hear Mike Ashley's involved, we know how vilified he was at this point in Newcastle, but we also hear the other side of him, that he's a good businessman. So what was the kind of thinking with Ashley when you heard he was kind of gaining more power?
Well, my whole thing with Ashley, when he was one of the initial investors that Charlie Boy brought to the table, and you thought, well, you know, again, you're a Rangers fan, Sons of Struth's no a thing at the time. I'm just trying to file him. I'm going, well, that's a guy with a big business, and that's a guy with a few quid. That sounds great. That soon changed, you know. And probably the stuff about Newcastle was probably in the back of our head somewhere, but it was a club that I don't have any. I do now because I've done a lot of stuff with their fans, but you know, I didn't have much feelings for Newcastle, so I wasn't totally aware of the ins and outs yet. Probably knew that some of them weren't happy with him, and was quite happy to dispel that when he's turning up at our club as an initial investor. But then when you fast forward and you start looking at, you know, how much we're getting or not getting, 40, 50 grand a year for a kit and all that sort of nonsense, then, you know, you soon find out who the real Mike Ashley is. And that guy doesn't care about anything else in the whole world apart from Sports Direct. That's it. That's where his passions end.
Yeah. I mean, we'll touch on it later on when obviously the kind of coup takes place. But the thing that I obviously want to get your thoughts on was the kind of boycott, the kind of the part you played in that, and getting fans to kind of make that leap that this needs to, for the benefit of the club, you need to stop giving these guys money, and it's going to. I mean, you and I we've grown up fans of the club, and there's nothing better than going to watch a team play football. But at that point, it wasn't. I mean, the on-field stuff wasn't enjoyable, but you knew where your money was going off the field, and it was just that. How did you kind of make that journey?
People like to rewrite history. People like to water over stuff, and I laughed when I read the chairman's notes and the last three GM notes telling you about the current board, about how they wrestled regime change from the old board. And, you know, as fortunate as we have to have these people that are Rangers fans and have put money into the club, not one of that board wrestled anything for anybody.
Yeah.
The three people that wrestled the club from the old board were John Gilligan, Dave King and Paul Murray.
Yes.
Okay. But the biggest single thing that got them in that position, regardless of what anybody wants to tell you, was that boycott. If we didn't boycott it to the levels that the Rangers fans did for that the season ticket renewals, we might have been into admin before we get rescued, because I strongly believe that was the end game for the second thing, right? So we had to do it. We had to do it pretty damn quick, and I believe that was the single biggest factor in getting regime change. And I get emotional talking about it, because I think the year before it was 40,000 season ticket holders. And on renewal day that year, we had 16,000.
Yeah.
Now that, see when we came up with this mad idea, and chronologically what happened, it was a bit bizarre. We used to plan protests and stuff, and we used to go to a hotel on the south side of Glasgow called the Ivory. So the usual suspects would be there, and there'd be guys for the UB, there'd be guys for the Rangers Supporters Trust, there'd be guys for this group and that group, and influential people that I'll no name because, you know, down to them whether they want to say they were part of this or not, and some of them very well known people. And we would all sit around the table in there, and I'd go, right, boys, I fancy doing a card display this week, or that game there, and this is my idea, and everybody would have a bit of input and would eventually come up with some plans. And we were sitting at one night, and it was the exact same people every meeting. And I can't remember what we were wanting to do, but we were planning something. And I said, guys, you're for the Union Bears. You're for the Supporters Trust. You're for this group. You're for that group. You're Sons of Struth. It's the same people when we're doing everything under the name of Sons of Struth. And the referendum was just starting to be a thing and talked about. And it was a play on words. I said, why don't we start putting things out as the union of fans? But the same people saying the same things. But it gives it some, because sometimes the board are going, I mean, who's Sons of Struth? There's only two of them, right? It'll give us a wee bit more credence here. And one of the first things we discussed, as you know, the same people that were in this room the next week, we just started saying, what we decided was things that were sort of businessy and shares and stuff, we'll put statements out as a union of fans, and Chris Graham will be the spokesperson for that most of the time. And when it's get it right and about them, it'll be Craig Houston going as Sons of Struth, right? But it's the same folks saying the same thing. One night, we decided that we were going to start asking Rangers fans not to buy their season tickets this year. So it was well in advance of the renewals coming in. And we looked at the positives and the negatives. And then, this was actually my first I hadn't met Dave King by this point. A couple of days after that meeting, I got a phone call from somebody saying, Dave King wants to do this. And my initial reaction was, well, we had put in plans and with statements, we were going to have a press conference as the union of fans to sell this idea to the Rangers fans. And we were getting all that lined up. And I said, well, that's great. We'll carry on doing what we're doing. And we'll do the press conference on the Thursday. And Dave King can come in on the Friday supporting this. I said, I think that'll work better because it's the fans that are leading it, not a single person leading it. And he supports it fully and blah, blah, blah. But then somebody sat me down and spoke to me about the finances involved in doing what we were about to do. And there was hunters it needed, right? And from that point alone, we decided to do it reverse. And Dave King would launch this, don't buy your season tickets and donate the money, put the money into this account, we'll hold it and all that nonsense. Because there was a lot of money involved in doing that. And Dave King's got, you probably understand, he's got a few quid more than me. So that's how the thing was sold to the public. So Dave went out on the Thursday, whatever it was, and done his big presser. And then we've all battered in supporting it on day two. So it was always a fan-led thing. It turned into a Dave King thing. And I don't have a problem. I'm sure Dave King wouldn't have a problem, in height, now that we're, 4 or 5 years up the road for it. Sorry, 7 or 8 years up the road for it. But that's how it happened. So when you factor in that was a group of fans decided to do this thing, but we still didn't know how many folk would get into it. And what we started doing near the time was saying to folk, look, see if you genuinely don't know what to do, because I had sat in the same seat since I was 8-year-old. And we used to have 4 seats. There was me, my dad, my grandfather, and my grandmother. Just got that. These seats now we've got 2, and it was just me and my dad. He's passed away now since as well. So at that time, those seats were very emotional. I had a real emotional attachment to my seat. So I thought, it's going to be a big ask. And we're never going to get everybody to not do it. But we need to get enough people. That means they need money and they can't, they'll need to get in, And it was phenomenal. And we were getting, we had a lot of people in Ibrox that are Rangers fans that were buying into what we were doing. So, we were getting a lot of help with some information. And we were getting fed the ticket office renewals numbers. But we weren't 100% sure, because we would be hearing, by the way, they're only at 10,000 now. But Rangers would put out a statement saying they're flying, they're at 22,000 already, right? Yeah. So there was a bit of uncertainty. I didn't think they were right, and I thought we were right. And then it was about 2 days before the season ticket renewal date, and my phone, we just spoke about him, my phone came up, Graham Wallace. And I went, we're right. We're right. Before I even answered the phone, I knew we'd won. Because if Graham Wallace, I think they were suggesting 30,000 at the time. And we were suggesting about 14,000 at the time. If they were right, he's no phoning me.
Exactly.
So as soon as my phone rang that day, I answered it and I went, Graham, your figures are right, aren't they? What do you mean? I went, why are you phoning me? You're not phoning me to tell me you've got 36,000 season tickets. So you need me for something now. What is it? And we were all invited into a meeting that turned into a bit of a disaster anyway. But that single thing, and I was so emotional about that. You're talking about 25 to 30,000 people have done exactly what we asked. Yeah. And I know how bad it was. And my dad, I couldn't even discuss it with my dad, because I thought, I don't want to be in that position. I never told anybody no to buy a season ticket. What I done was, I said, I'm not buying one. Could you do the same? That's different from telling people. And I didn't want to have that conversation with my own father. And I remember coming in, and the renewals used to come through the post. And I went in to see him one day, and he says, I'll stick that up there, son. You tell me when I have to open it. So what do you mean? He says, my season ticket, I said, you've not opened it? He says, no, you tell me when it's safe to open it. I said, you're not buying your season ticket this year, Dad? He says, how could I, son? How could I buy mine when thousands of people are doing what you've asked them? And that to me was the biggest factor in getting regime change. And the fact that it was done with tens of thousands of Rangers supporters will live with me my dying day. Just it was amazing, the amount of people that were able to do it. And then God bless every one of them. It was difficult, and everybody would have their own emotional ties and reasons why it was a difficult decision. But every single one of the people deserved all the praise in the world.
And obviously that as well, that the fans played a colossal part in this, but the EGM, the campaigning to get the EGM as well, how kind of hard was that to really get people to go that this is the way we need to go? We need to get this way, because it's a hard thing. You remember how toxic that AGM was in December at that gazebo nonsense, but that I remember specifically, like Paul Murray was getting interviewed that day, and they were saying, like, we need to do that. We need to get these guys out, and it's hard to get people to make that journey because they just want the best for the club, but you can see right in front of your eyes that these guys are out to hurt you, and the likes of Paul Murray, Dave King, John Gilligan, those three in particular, all they want is the best for the club. How hard is it to kind of get the people to campaign to go, right, we need an EGM, we need to get this through as quickly as possible?
You're asking how hard the campaigning was actually harder at the start than it was at the end.
Right.
Because everybody had a journey to go from thinking Charles Green was a good guy to sack the board. Right. Yeah. My journey from that point to that point was maybe 3 or 4 months. Some people it was 2 years, some people it was a year. So everybody's journey was different. I think when we got there, you can never say every Rangers fan agreed on it, because you'll never, that amount of people's a number you could never get, put a number on. And I don't think any single topic would ever get 100% of them. So it was never all the Rangers fans. And I learned that quite early, and I thought, we don't need to get everybody on board, we just need to get enough. So as every day and week and month went on, more and more people were getting of similar mind. So the stuff we asked folk to do at the end was far easier than the stuff we were asking folk to do at the beginning. And one of the first things we boycotted was the kit. Don't buy off them. Here's the figures. We're making it 3 pence out of 10 or something.
Exactly.
Crazy figures. And that was difficult. But again, you get an emotional thing, and if you've got kids and you've got guys that just automatically spend £200 a year buying the 3 strips and from head to toe. And again, we were never going to make that figure zero, but we made enough of a difference to have him rethinking. But that was probably harder than the things that we were doing 2 months up the road. You understand what I'm saying? So
yeah. By
the time it got to the end, it was the dogs in the street wanted them out.
No. And can I get to that stage kind of towards March where an AGM's obviously coming, but Somers and James Easdale resign? Do you think they obviously must have saw the writing in the wall, because they knew the fans they were getting a vote, and they didn't have much in the way of support. The fans hated them. That's simple. Yeah. They absolutely hated them. Do you think they must have saw the writing in the wall?
Oh, 100%.
When do you think they saw the writing in the wall from, though? Do you think it got to a stage where, because you remember, we speak about Green, that ridiculous interview he did with Jim White. Remember, he's in the hospital bed. That's Chuckles at his best. That's the Chuckster going, feel sorry for me, I'm in the hospital. When I think was a quote that day was to get arrested or something.
Right. I'll let you into a wee secret, right? I'll give you a wee bit of a scoop, right? That's never been public knowledge. I'll tell you how that came about. I started it, right? Charlie was never away. See that shite he resigned?
Yeah.
Charlie was always playing it for the bag. Charlie was over in America trying to sell to Americans. Because if you sell to Americans, there's a normal business practice over there where you sign a bit of paper saying you'll never disclose anything about the old regime. So selling us to Americans at that time would probably be not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But this was a guy that had resigned 6 months before, by the way, that was around America selling Rangers. I was getting told every time he went in an airport. I was getting told every time he checked into a hotel. I knew exactly where that man was almost every day. Bizarre, right? And then it stopped. And I didn't know where he was. And I thought, I try to get to know people's head to try and understand the way they think, right? And I thought, see if something bad comes out about him. His character wouldn't let him let it lie, right? So I started a lie and a myth. And I phoned a mate of mine up. The guy who was a coach for us at the time. I was saying, what's that phone? Anyway, I phoned us. I said, do us a favour, you on follow? Aye, you on Twitter? Aye, you on Facebook? Aye, go and do us a favour. Go and stick out. And it was a half-truth, right? I knew they were starting to get the paperwork ready for it.
Yeah.
I said, go and put out that Charlie Boy's getting arrested today. Is he? And I went, no. I said, but watch what happens next. right? And he's like, see, so I got a guy to start a rumour that Charlie Boy had get the nick, hoping I couldn't put it out, because everything we put out, I had to have, if I got known to be telling lies and talking shite, we would have lost a lot of people that had believed in us. Yeah. So I couldn't put it out, right? So I got it, put it out, and by tea time that night, fucking what wonders, there's Charlie Boy. I went, right, he's in London now, right? And that was it. So, aye, that was how that's, mate, it was, and that was just sort of shite I'm telling you about. Things that are in a box away up there, I forgot I've done. Until you start talking to me and asking me about, it's Charlie, and I've never shared that story publicly, by the way, so you get a wee scoop there. It was, and I remember somebody who, again, will remain nameless because he's very famous, phoned me that day, and he's like, I've heard a rumour that he's getting a nick. And I went, calm down, I started it. He's like, what? I started that rumour, it's nonsense. What did you do that for? I said, I want to find out who he is. Phoned me up an hour later, and he went, you played that a blinder, big man. Sorry, I'm digressing, and
that's an interesting point, because I mean, you look at that, you watch that interview, and I watched it today actually, just to get it back in my head, and he's playing the victim. That's what he's doing.
Aye.
And he's wanting people to believe that. I mean, he comes out and says that Mike Ashley's the best. Nobody on earth is going to fall for that, and it's just the chuckster at his bet. He's wanting to sell this guy that he's brought in, and he's just a poisonous individual. I think he's the worst character of this whole story, in my opinion.
There's another weird thing happened that night. Somebody else famous phoned me, right? And I was like, I said, do you know what? I said, I forgot about this. It's funny. He said, I said, do you know what I'm raging at? And I went, what? I says, Jim White's giving him an easy interview. He's not getting in about him. And he's given him, it was on the news, it was every 30 minutes or something on Sky that night, right? And I was sitting, my dad was alive at the time, I was sitting in his living room and I'm talking to this dead and well-known guy. So my dad was sitting with his jaw dropped, thinking, he's talking to such and such, right? So I came off the phone, my dad's, was that such and such? I went, aye. I said, but this guy, I said, I'd love to give that Jim White a bad piece of my mind. And he says, well, phone him. I says, I don't have Jim White's phone number, right? And he says, well, I'll give you it, right? And I'm going, this is potty. So he texts me Jim White's mobile number. He's still working. I'm watching him live on the studio on Sky, right? And with my dad in my dad's living room. And I've texted Jim, my name's Craig Cousins. You might not have known me, but I run Sons of Struth. I've done some interviews for your station at times, so you might have heard of that. Can I talk to you if you don't mind? So he finishes his shift, and within 15 minutes, I've saved his number as Jim White. My phone shows Jim White. And I'm like, with that, who's that? And so, hi Craig, Jim White here, how can I help you? Right, I'm buckled, right, I'm on the floor, mate, I've lost it, right? Anyway, he's like, how can I help you? I says, listen, Jim, I says, see that swine you've just did, who's tiny today? I says, he's a dirty two-faced liar, and you've pandered to him. I said, but going to do me a favour to repay my faith in you? He says, yeah, what's that, Craig? If you can do it, I'll help you, right? I said, see when he does get arrested, because it's not that far away, could you do me a big favour and put up that wee 3 seconds of him saying to you today in that hospital bed, I'm not getting arrested, because I've got news for you. It's coming to his door, and it's coming to his door pretty damn soon. Rest assured. Okay, Craig, lovely to talk to you. See if I can do that, right? I'm in knots, right? I'm in the flare. My dad's like, Jim White, what's he phoning you for? So I text him. And, see when you consider that story, that's how bizarre the whole thing was.
Yeah.
There was a guy like me that nobody knew the name of 2 years before it, having Jim White phone him, because somebody even more famous than Jim White gave me his phone number half an hour before it. And you're like, what is going on? Oh, sorry, mate. That was
that was brilliant. That was brilliant. That was a great impression as well. It's
all right, aye.
That was good, actually, aye.
I've looked forward to listening to your podcast back and see if I can pull off a Jim White. Hi, Craig, Jim White here. Oh, brilliant.
When the good guys eventually get the EGM, and just remember everything about that day just felt monumental. What was the kind of memories of that day? If you can look back in that day and just think of what your overall memory was.
Well, the first thing was going to the AGM, and I had loads of people saying, "Can I pick you up?" And I went, "No, I wanted to walk Paisley Road West
Mm-hmm.
like I did on a match day, and I wanted to do it myself.
There was never any doubt that it was only going that way.
The dogs in the street knew that the result was done before the AGM opened up, and we all had the information because we knew the voting patterns and we knew who was doing what, right? So I wanted to take it in. To me, it was a bigger victory than 9 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It was that important to the club.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to go to Ibrox that day as if I was going again.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked to Ibrox, and when I got there, it was quite humbling because the amount of people that wanted to, strangers, I don't know who they are, come up and shake my hand and pat me in the back. And I was like, I always find it difficult because I always, my stock answer is I've never done anything myself. I was maybe just loud. But if, like this, the strip boycotts and the season ticket boycotts, if thousands of people were, you remember the Hearts game, the crowds outside Ibrox that night were mental, with people putting up, red flags and blue cards, red card and blue card displays, 30,000 people holding stuff up. If these people hadn't done that, maybe not got, the result that we all wanted. So, it's quite emotional when anybody wants to pay you a compliment, and especially such an important thing as that. And then the AGM was I can't remember it. I genuinely can't remember it. And then I came out, and we again, there was just people, total strangers, old women, young girls, guys in their 60s, boys in their 20s. And I done what I'd do after the game. I walked the Paisley Road in reverse, and I went to the district park to wait for the results to come in that we knew. We just wanted them finalised. One of the most bizarre things, Scott, that ever happened. There's a guy, Monty, that runs an Ixdale bus, and he was in the pub. The pub was stowed. Loads of people had helped with the campaign. And we know that the result's just about to come up on Sky. So I'm standing, everybody's watching the screens, and Monty came up and patted me in the back. And he went, Craig, there's an elderly gentleman over there wanting to talk to you. I went, I ain't bother, mate, but this result's just about to get declared. And he went, no, Craig, you're not listening to me. Go and talk to that old man. And I thought he meant just to show him a bit of respect because his age, his seniority. And I thought, why is he so? Give me 30 seconds to this. Anyway, I'm looking at Monty and I'm thinking, Monty knows the game better than me. Monty was a great help because, through all the stuff that we've done. Anyway, so I walked the length of the bar, in the district bar, and there was this old up man. And I said, how you doing, sir? My name's Craig Houston. My friend said you were wanting to talk to me. And for the life of me, I'm trying to remember his name. I'll remember it 30 seconds after this call finishes. I can't remember his Christian name, but his surname was Struth.
Right.
And he was his nephew.
Right, okay. Wow.
And he was 55. And he came to the AGM. And he said, and he got tip of my tongue. It wasn't Bill Struth, but yes, he's I'm Bill Struth. And I went, Struth? As in Bill Struth? He says, yeah, that was my Uncle William. No, my heart just went.
Yeah.
And see, that's exact moment, Scott. The pub erupted as the result came through. Right? It was the freakiest, most bizarre event. The timing of it, what it meant. And I was just like, wow. And I said, look, sir, I says, I picked your uncle's name for an organisation I started. I says, and I've done a lot of things in the last few years. I said, so could you take my personal apology and sincerest apology if I've ever done anything to, that wasn't keeping me your uncle's name? And he says, don't worry about that at all, Craig. He said, every one of us Struths are delighted with everything that you've done.
It's brilliant.
The end, subtitles, finished. And that was it. Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. So that was my mate. And you can possibly forgive me for forgetting the bit in the middle. And then it was absolutely smashed.
Aye, quite right. Quite right. That's an amazing story. It's great how you kind of remember it that way. But the kind of final point before we kind of reflect on your kind of personal kind of contribution and things like that, how bad was the club? See when the good guys walked in to Ibrox, how bad a state was it in?
Right, well, I'll tell you, there'll be 3 different levels of how bad it was. There'll be the how bad it was that was made public.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be the how bad it was because I found out other stuff that maybe wasn't in the public domain. And then there'll be the level that only ever the directors of Rangers Football Club will know me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you and I know, without any insight, how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
The building, for example, hadn't been touched in nearly a decade.
Yeah. I don't think it was office chairs either, was that?
They just didn't spend any money. You know, they went through a lot of money, but there was nothing to show for it. So that can only leave us to decide, you know, without leaving ourselves wide open for lawsuits, potentially, you know, where did this money go? The building was terrible. Every contract was in the favour of the other end, no us. You know, we were tied up with litigation and Sports Direct stuff. And there was a thing that I made public. I got arrested for this one, but never charged. I get arrested for allegedly internet theft of an email. And I put out an email. Sorry, that's what it was in the email. I was going to tell you the story about that. Was a Summers email that I had that was correspondence between him and Ashley saying, basically, you better hurry up and do something here, Mike, because if no, it'll look stupid us refusing Dave King's offer. Which was interesting because Summers told everybody that he was an independent director.
Mm-hmm.
But he was giving and taking instructions. So I had this email and I put that out. That wasn't the thing I was going to tell you. So I put out another document I became owner of, and it was signed weeks before that AGM. And it was a 10-year lease on our shop at the stadium for £1 a year. Now, they done that on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll, you know, if they'd done that with that thing, common sense would suggest that they'd done that with everything. So that's what I'm saying. There was a level of stuff that everybody would know about. There's a level of stuff, other stuff below that I would come across. And then there's the truth, which would be even lower again. Yeah. So, horrific, mate. Absolutely horrific.
Looking back, we spent a wee while going through it all. When I mean, there's so much and there's so much bad. But yourself, I mean, the first person I wanted to get on to talk about this was yourself, because the part you played in it. And how do you feel when I kind of ask you here, like, what part do you feel you played in it, and how grateful were you that you managed to kind of bring forward regime change in a way?
Well, as I said to you earlier, I put a mask on, right, through it. So when you say things like the words that you've just said, the first feeling I get is, who's he talking about, right? Because I've done so much with this mask on that I became a character. And the guy that you seen in TV and you read in newspapers and you seen standing outside Ibrox with a megaphone, that wasn't me. That was this thing that I had to become. So it's strange. I find it difficult to take any plaudits for anything, because one, I think that's just human nature. You know, Scottish people are not very good at taking credit for stuff, but also because of this thing, I became almost schizophrenic by design, is probably the best way of describing it. So it wasn't me, it was him, right? And that probably helped my sanity through it. But as I said earlier, I've got a stock answer that I never done anything alone. I maybe was loud and I maybe come up with ideas and I was maybe push, and sometimes I was really good at pushing a wee bit over the line, especially when Rangers directors at the time were concerned. But, you know, if Craig Houston didn't have anybody standing beside him, it would just have been a noise. It would have achieved nothing. So I didn't do anything alone. And I was maybe loud and I was maybe brave, you know, when you factor in I had my life threatened, I was sued for 100,000, I was arrested, I had ashes at my back door, I had vans outside my house at 3 a.m. and all these things. So to get through that, you know, but, you know, there's a fine line between being brave and being stupid. But again, it wasn't me being brave because I had this mask on, it was that other guy. Craig Houston couldn't have got through that. I would have been finished after 2 or 3 months. With the pressure that I was getting, probably not a lot of people out there will ever fully appreciate what I was personally going through at the time. There was lots of, it was coming at me from lots of angles. But aye, so what did I do? I don't know. I obviously I had information at the start, and I started getting more and more information, and I was brave enough to share that with the Rangers fans. That I've done that. That's a, you know, I can understand that part. People say I galvanised the support. I was a leader. I never gave myself these titles. I just done what I done, and I'll tell you why I done it, Scott. The night before administration, I had a pal who was an ex-football hooligan. No. And I wasn't friends with him through Rangers. I was friends with him through coaching kids football out in Cambuslang at the time. And I phoned him up the night before we went into admin. So that would have been the 13th of April 2012. And I said, Sandy, see if we needed a mob together tonight, how many of your boys could we get together? And he went, I don't know, 40, 50, 25, 100. It depends what it is. I said, well, do you think it's fair to say that Bluey White's not telling us the full truth? There's something going on that we don't know about. He went, I think that's fair to say. I said, well, I've got a mad idea. I want to turn up at Ibrox tonight, and I want to get ladders or the blue gates, and I want to go in with as many folk as we can, and we'll handcuff ourselves to the dugouts and then the enclosure, and we'll phone the papers and the TV, and we'll say, we're no moving until somebody comes out of this building and tells us what's going on, because they're telling us lies. There's something that's no right. Well, Sandy Chug's one of the biggest nutters I know. Well, he's no big, he's about 4 foot, nothing, but you know what I mean? He's crackers about, right? Love him to bits. He's like a brother I've never had, but he's potty. And he said to me, big man, you're off your effing nut. I went, what? He went, do you think I could get 50 football hooligans to climb out? And I went, well, it's the only way. I couldn't get numbers up. And he went, you're off your nut. And that was the end of the call. The next day, we went into admin. Now, if we had done that night, nothing would have changed. We would still have went into admin the next day. It would have achieved zero. But what it would have done, it would have took away the guilt that I've got, and I know a number of other Rangers fans have got, that we actually done nothing to help prevent admin. So that's the only benefit we'd have got if that mad pal of mine had said, aye, that's a good idea, let's get 50 lads out and tie ourselves in. So what happens next is you get the news the next day, get him for work, phoning my mate, we're all in tears, we're all can't believe it. I went to meet him and I went, Sandy, how much do you inside now wishes we'd done something like this? It changed nothing, Scott. But I felt guilt, I was riddled with guilt. And the 2 years made a pact that night that if we ever felt bad about what was happening inside our football club, we would do something. Now, if we'd done something and it had no impact whatsoever, at least it would have taken away a bit of the guilt of doing nothing previously. If we didn't have that conversation on the 13th of April, Sons of Struth would never have happened. Because Sons of Struth happened to stop me and Sandy Chug feeling guilty if something bad had went on after it again. It's bizarre, isn't it? So that's why I done what I done. It was driven through guilt. And then by the time you start that ball rolling, we got some leaflets printed and started handing them out at matches and thought, this will last a fortnight. And it just evolved. And then we didn't even have a name. And we thought, Facebook, right, we'll get one of these Facebook things. And I was sitting and what do you want to call the page? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And the Spirit of Shankly was in my head for some reason, which was SOS. And I thought, well, that's quite appropriate.
Yeah.
Struth, Jesus, what more, when you're wanting to talk to people about dignity and respect and all these standards. Sons of Struth. It was as quick as that. And right, okay, so I'll start this Facebook, Sons of Struth. And we thought it would take a fortnight. But it caught imagination of enough people. So I think I could possibly accept praise for starting the thing, as in Sons of Struth. I wouldn't be the only person at the time that was asking questions in, pubs and clubs or pals talking and work and stuff. But we'd done something about it. But we had no plans of grandeur, we had no illusions of grandeur. We just thought we would do it for probably selfish reasons to stop us feeling guilty if it went bad again. Excuse me. And then the snowball effect. And it just got bigger and bigger. And then Sandy had some private things, personal things that were going on at the time, and it get left to me. And don't get me wrong, there was sometimes some real dark times, and I needed help and some stuff that we needed to do that people will never know about, because there's just some things are best left unsaid. But we've done a lot of things that we didn't publicise, let's put it that way. And Sandy, because Sandy's background was able to help with a lot of these things. So although it was me that done 80-90% of it, I tell you something, see the 10% Sandy Chug done, arguably as important as 80 or 90% I done. And a wee man, it was probably better because it has passed as well. You know, he was an ex-football hooligan, he'd been in jail and all these things. It was probably, if we were to plan it with a PR guy, they would have probably said, you take a back seat, son, and you that nobody knows has to front this up. But that wasn't why we done it. It was circumstances, you know, that led to that. So, you know, I could possibly accept a bit of praise for that. That I could handle that. But the other things, and, you know, I find it difficult to accept praise. But again, there's, you know, this mask, and I forget half the stuff we've done, Scots. I keep saying to you, you know, somebody wrote a book. There's a book out there by Craig Houston. I didn't write it. It was ghostwritten. And it probably tells about 15% of what went on, and it's quite a thick book. But, you know, again, nothing would have happened without tens of thousands of people buying into and getting to be the same thought as we were from day one. Yeah.
Craig, it's been absolutely a pleasure to talk to you. I've really appreciated you coming on. Thank you very much indeed. No problem. Well, listen, thanks very much for inviting me. I hope I've gave your listeners some pleasure in my tales of woe. And just finish off, thanks very much for the invite. I've enjoyed the experience. It brought up some memories that I put in my books up there. Some of them pleasant, some of them not so pleasant. But I just, anybody that's listening that didn't buy a shirt or didn't renew their season ticket or stood and held a banner or put up a card, thank you very much, because regime change wouldn't happen without you. Yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear your story and kind of reminiscing these days. But on the next part of the Rangers' journey, we will look at the new era at Ibrox. What happened when regime change took place in 2015 and Mark Warburton came in as the club's new manager and Rangers got back to where they belonged, the Scottish Premiership. Thank you very much to Craig for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you very much to everyone that tuned in. Please subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels and follow us on social media and follow us for the next part of the Rangers' journey.